This is, in my opinion, one of the most terrifying scenes I've ever watched. The chimpanzee sequence in Nope is an incredibly suspenseful moment. Now, I will say that a great contributing factor to this is the fact that I saw it on a giant cinema screen while I was traveling alone for the first time and I was very far away from home. The effect really isn't the same when watching it on a TV. When you have this giant animal, the relentless Gordy, looking straight at you, it's pretty terrifying. Now, I have always thought that when you're showing the villain of the movie that it needs to be barely visible. It should be in the shadows with a lot of darkness so that it's the most terrifying. But this scene quickly disproved that to a large extent, even though Gordy is not technically the villain of the movie. There's also hardly any darkness, which goes against what probably every other horror movie would do. For me personally, I have to say that there was actually a reason for why this sequence in particular was so scary for me, because it reminded me of a different movie that I've seen years earlier. There's a scene in a movie called The Square. It's not a horror movie, it's very different, but there's this one scene in it that's very strange. It takes place during a fancy dinner party for museum goers. There's an artist who's invited to perform his piece where he acts like an ape. It starts off as funny and a little weird, but it slowly becomes very uncomfortable and aggressive. The artist challenges the guests' boundaries, and the scene eventually escalates as the artist's actions become more threatening, making you wonder if they're about to fight or something. Even though this is a different movie, it has a very similar vibe to Nope, probably because the actor performing the movements and sounds is the same. It's weird when you're watching a movie like this and it isn't supposed to be scary, and then you have a scene like this, it just makes it much more terrifying. The scene in Nope plays out very similarly. But what makes it so terrifying? First off, the fact that the movie starts off with this greatly adds to the atmosphere. In case you forgot, we start off with very little context. We're basically thrown into this moment and so many questions come up. What's up with this shoe? Why is there blood? And who is this chimp? Of course, we're given some clues in the voiceover, but this frantic search for what is even happening adds a certain level of stress. And then you have the ending of the scene. The chimp looks directly at us. At this point, we don't know that Ricky is under the table. We don't even know who Ricky is, but it's such a cool twist to the scene. First, it feels like we're only watching this unfold from a distance, and suddenly we become a part of the scene, and the threat starts to feel a little bit real. There's something else that I noticed later on, which is that there are still people in the audience who are very still, quiet, barely moving, as to not draw any attention to themselves. This becomes almost too real when you have that one actor who gets killed and everyone is just sort of quiet, hoping that they won't be the next one. The complete lack of music also makes it feel more realistic. Now, I don't think this is always the case. Music can greatly drive the emotions of the scene, but here it makes us feel even more lost. Then there's the matter of perspective. We eventually get Ricky's reactions, but other than that, we're pretty much locked into this shot, like we're the ones under the table. The threat then becomes even further amplified when another one of the actors tries escaping the chimp. He runs through the set but gets caught in another room, implying that this will be our fate as well. There are so many crazy angles and movements that you can do nowadays with cameras, but when it comes to horror, using the simplest one is often the best. You're not trying to create a shot where people wonder how you did it, but instead you stay focused on a perspective that feels like we're in the scene. The mystery of the shoe makes it all the more terrifying. I'm not going to go into what this means because it's kind of open to interpretation and a bunch of people have already covered it, so I don't need to add on to it, and I still kind of think about what it means to me. Then there are the reaction shots of Ricky. Now honestly, I think this scene would work just as well without his reactions. It's powerful enough on its own, but of course we need it at the very least for the story to progress. But I think they're very interesting because we really get that frozen stiff reaction here, and it gets applied to us. The fact that the threat is an animal also means that we have no idea what will happen next, compared to if this were a human who's like a serial killer or something like that. The chimpanzee is completely unpredictable, and that is shown not only by the actual animal, but in Ricky's reactions. I will also say that when I think of a horror movie, and most likely you guys too, A lot of different things come to mind, but few of them are at all realistic. We see demons, ghosts, curses, invisible forces, haunted objects, and all that kind of stuff, which can all be very scary, but they don't feel real. It can work very well because we don't know what exactly a ghost or demon will do to us, but this feels like it could actually happen, especially because Gordy, the chimp, is exploited and kind of forced to be on the show. The exploitation is one of the main themes of the entire story, so in some way it's like Gordy is getting revenge. They pissed off the animal and now it's coming back for them. That is scary. A chimp is also a very interesting choice because of how loud, aggressive, powerful, and smart they are, all of which are traits that build up the fear even more. This sequence also doesn't happen in one go. It cuts off and is split up without giving us a real ending until later in the movie. This allows the moment to sit in our heads for a much longer amount of time. Usually we get some anticipation, then there's a scare, and then it's over to the next scene. But here, just when the threat is amplified, this scene cuts off abruptly and we're left wondering for a long time how it continues. This is a trick I see more and more of in horror movies today. We've gotten so used to jump scares that filmmakers sometimes intentionally exploit our expectations by just not giving us a jump scare at all, only winding up the tension and then leaving it. This forces the horror to sit with us longer because the suspense is never released. Of course, in the case of this scene, we do eventually get a conclusion. One final note, perhaps this works so well because Jordan Peele identifies with this scene quite a lot. According to Terry Notary, the actor for the chimp, he said that when he talked to Jordan Peele, he compared Gordy being taken advantage of to the early days of his career. Even though you obviously can't see that directly on screen, I believe that it allowed the scene to become as terrifying as it did because there's a level of truth behind the psychology of the moment, something that we feel subconsciously. This is a scene that just feels real in every possible aspect. I'm not saying it's realistic, but it feels authentic, and in horror, that's something we rarely get. By the way, sometimes I get asked why I make a video like this, and honestly, it's because when a scene scares me, it kind of helps me to just talk about it a little bit. That way I understand it and get less scared of it until I watch the next horror movie. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.